Oh, hi, Scott.
Hello.
Hi.
How's everyone doing? Hey, Dina. I know Dina.
Yay, I'm so glad you're all here.
네, 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네 번째 팀이고요. 그리고 팀 D.FLUENCE 김희연 소장님 그리고 김범진 교수님 팀으로 구성되어 있습니다. 주제는 인간을 찾다, 인간의 경험적 가치를 재현하고 미래의 도시 모습을 구상하다라는 주제로 발표를 해주시겠습니다. 약 20분간의 발표 이후에 지금 들어오신 패널 분들과 함께 패널 디스커션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 준비되셨으면
네, 그러면은 스크린을 쉐어를 할까요? 네.
네, 스크린 쉐어로 보여주시면 좋겠습니다.
네, 일단 저희 소개부터 시작을 할 텐데요. 저는 임이현이라고 하고요. 지금 스크린을 쉐어하고 있는데 나오고 있는지 모르겠습니다.
네.
It's an email.
Okay. Stop sharing. There it is.
Yep.
네, 지금은 이제 이메일 대신 저희 페이지가 나오길 바라고요. Yep. So I hope you can all see our screen now. So my name is Ian, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you. And I would like to start our presentation of Finding Human in the New Normal. So this is our intermediate results, and we would like to also have a panel discussion following our short presentation. Yeah, so life beyond COVID, I mean, it's an experience that we're all going through at the moment. So from shelter in place, quarantine, to all these new protocols around physical context, these changes will stay with us. And this is, I think, the point that we want to really think and use this as an opportunity to imagine what new possible futures that we may be facing. As an example, such as how our home is becoming a place where we experience all of the public activity that's been happened in the public space. So lots of the space between the public space and private spaces, all of that's becoming very blurred. And we're also seeing introduction of digital spaces and how it's merging into our physical spaces as well. Another interesting aspect that we also are witnessing is the fast adoption of technology and how a lot of these emerging technology is being retooled and being introduced into our daily lives. So we think that right now is the opportune moment to think and really observe what the key human experiences are, what the values are that is important in our lives through the interviews of the people that we have spoke with, and to use those as our leverage to envision our post-COVID futures.
My name is Bumjin from D.FLUENCE as well. So this is our research process, which was a collaborative effort. We had a tremendous help. So left diagram is a set of emotion keywords adopted Plutchik's emotion wheel. Our perception of the environment is related to the reinterpretations of gathered data, especially in the way we store, transform, and recall this knowledge. So in our participatory study, we locate these experiences and memories from users in an effort to translate personal knowledge into the language of design. So next step involves coding, mapping, and thematic analysis of stories collected from in-depth interview. We analyze individual experience of the pandemic by interpreting meanings in the perception and action of individual responses and finding patterns among multiple users' stories. So we extract insights on human experiential values. So the first, the left diagram is about grouping with secondary research, which is the signals and trend research. And the middle diagram, it shows the overall cluster mapping extracting key value, which is Ihan is going to dive into later. So next. So this is one example from board emotions. So first one is 16 selected keywords inspired by emotion wheels. And the right diagram is the one example from board emotions, how we collected and coding by making them bold. So the next. This is a small part of Excel spreadsheet, how we collected and analyzed and gives them a color coding to analyze it. Next. This is a demographic infographic. So it shows the different age groups and country, etc. So we have more data interviewers in USA because we started in US. And of course, after we started WTA, we expanded our survey into Korea. So South Korea is the next, which is the 13% right now. So example, 18 to 24 ages, 36%, and 25 to 34 ages, 31%. So from 18 to 34 is about like a more than 60% from our interviewers. So male 40%, female 60%, and students 40%, non-students 60%. But within the 40% of students, there was a high school students 10%, 60% college students, grad students 30%, and within the 60% non-students, there was a diverse professionals like designers, engineers, doctor, lawyers, etc.
Yeah, so it was a lot of people that we have spoke with and a lot of data that we had to purge through and try to make sense of all the qualitative interview data that we heard from people. So as Bumjin mentioned, the use of the emotions, one way to get started, and by using these emotional keywords, which you see here in the middle of these 16 keywords that we have selected, it will allow us to probe further into their experiences of perhaps that they couldn't really remember some aspects of experience, hopefully tying that to the spatial experiences or environmental experiences that we can use those to map. So this is our mapping of the emotional keywords. So here you will see that it's been mapped around these concentric circles, and we have placed the very personal experience around emotions and how each of the emotions are mapped along both the self behaviors and adaptations in the core, and along as you go to the outer edges of the circle, we're going more towards interrelationships and also spatial perceptions. So this was one way for us to map all of the qualitative results to make sense of that data. And you will see here that what we have come up with at this point is by mapping those experiences along these axes, we were able to identify some of the common values that we have noted here in each of the circles. So we'll go through each one, and one of the ways for that we have started to cluster was then finding the most commonalities between each of these values here. And you'll see that we have grouped those into 3 or 4 different values that will speak to one another for us to kind of imagine an experience for the next steps in the future cities. So further into, so you can't really see all the details here, but this is a Zoom in version of the map that we're seeing here. So even though we had a lot of information and the data, the quotes from the interviews, what you're seeing here is an excerpt, some of the key ideas that's being explored. And that was our method of mapping this along this axis. So I will then go through the 4 clusters of the different, let's say, value keywords that we have extracted and what those meant for us and what people have expressed in terms of each of these values. So the first cluster is within, the cluster of behaviors and adaptations of the different, the individuals that we have spoken to. So one keyword, or the one value that came up a lot was self-care. The topic of care came a lot in the interviews, and which is about creating new routines or having the ability to adapt and changing to situations. It's also a lot about reinventing the space that you are at to provide a stream of new stimuli. And since we're in a very monotonous situation, a lot of the, there is a big role of our environment or our space, our home, to help with to improve the self-care. And of course, it's also about having access to space, outdoor space, or a space within your home that you can focus inward for self-reflection and recovery. Yeah, and so a lot of this information was about self-balance, well-being, mental balance, physical well-being. So the self-care was definitely one of the biggest topics that was discussed, and I think this is one key value that we want to hold on to. The second one within this cluster is productivity. So of course, we hear a lot about Zoom fatigue. Right now, we're also on Zoom too. But productivity is another big value. And I think it's interesting to note as we're going through this remote working through digital media, and even within, as we're spending a lot of time in our homes, we're sharing a lot of our spaces, kitchen, living room, or other spaces with others. So it's finding the moments that can be most productive and also knowing, learning how to use the additional time that you have gained because you're not all commuting. So how can we really leverage the space we have? And then also, how can we also use the third spaces that we no longer have access to, how those can be transitioned into our let's say, the space within the home. And the third space, I will also want to highlight how many of the interviewees talked about drawing inspiration or drawing energy, getting energy from these, having access to third spaces through people watching or just being in the crowd. The other 2 values within this cluster is control, and control is probably you have also sensed it too. It's really linked to the feeling of frustration, vulnerability, and the feeling of being overwhelmed. And it's through the overload information, having lack of accuracy in local information that's given to you. So we're thinking about, a lot of people have talked about how can we then have more control within the situation that we're in, whether it's to control the time, the schedule, or maybe even how we move around the city, and all of those, and how can we restore our sense of normalcy with having the control. So experiences or products and services within this area that enable us to plan or to provide structure in our time. That would also provide us a ways to be more resourceful and be resilient in these times of uncertainty. Last one in this the cluster is identity. And this is really a result of the self-care, being in control and being able to be put in your most productive self. And those all add up to forming one's identity within these times. And of course, it's also about creating meaningful time within what you have. And it's also, I would like to note that it's the experience or the value of identity is linked to our spatial environment also. Many people have talked about how they feel their adulthood has been delayed, or the loss of independence because we are confined to our spaces that we share with our parents or with other family members. So it's interesting to note that there are many makeshift communities, from housing pods to small communities, that's happening to provide a temporary space to really enhance the sense of identity. The second cluster, so we're moving away from the central parts and going more into the values and experiences around interpersonal relationships. Social connection is, of course, a huge topic at the moment. Although we may be, afraid to be in the crowd, people are missing the physical interaction with others. So, And as we're doing now, we can really connect virtually and attend events, attend global events at your convenience within your home through virtual conferencing technologies. But many of the issues within this virtual digital space is that you don't have the spatial ambience and the changes in scenery, and that really really highlights the monotony within the digital connections, and also the inability to read physical and social cues. And when you're in the digital setting, really brings difficulties when meeting new people. So I think this also gives us a way to think about how can we then design digital spaces that can capture these the needs of or desires of the human social connection. And additional experiences such as how can we have chance encounters, can we enjoy spontaneous experiences within these virtual and digital spaces. That's another things for us to imagine as well. So the lack of social connection have been tied to reduced self-productivity and then also well-being as well. So some of the images that you see down here, I think, are the experiences that's coming up through the COVID times, the Zoom parties or the watercolor moments, or a lot of the digital, even the games that's providing a chance for us to have these social connections. Moving on to other two values within the second cluster is spontaneity and exploration. And spontaneity, I think it's something that we really miss, the being to be able to plan on the go without having to really plan ahead, where you can just go and have fun with your freedom and roam around the city. So that type of spontaneous experience is something that we miss, and can we capture those in, let's say, when we migrate or when we think about bringing the virtual space into our physical spaces. Also, same for exploration too. Within the topic of exploration, it's a lot about discovering new experiences from your, and also being able to bring new stimulus and new stimuli into your daily activities. So where you can, have energy and inspiration from these new sources of activities and experiences that can be brought into your lives. So even though we have, lots of, subscription services, online classes, digital activities here, and so it's providing interesting venues for us to be explorative in this time. But again, I think this also provides us a way to think about balancing these digital and physical experiences. The third cluster, we're again moving more into the outer layer of the circle here within interpersonal and also spatial relationships. The two really interesting topics here, and I think, are locality and familiarity. So under the topic of local, what it means to be local, I think that's a question that has come up during these times. So hyperlocality is one topic, as well as glocal, so being able to be in your local space but have the global access. That really puts us into a spectrum of these different experiences. And it's also interesting to note that we're seeing resurgence of hyperlocal groups that create value and also return value back to their local communities. So, having you're really sensing your local community, the streets, the people around your neighborhood, and through the ways of creating local collaboration, mutual aid, that provides a feeling of solidarity. The introduction of local media has been also discussed a lot. These media services that communicate the information that's very tied to your local space, to your vicinity, and that also kind of takes us to the creation of these micro networks, the micro infrastructures of information, products, and services that link the local producers to the consumers and so forth. The last one, another one within this, the communal aspect is the familiarity. And familiarity is interesting because that's also a source of comfort for a lot of people. So knowing where you are, knowing what to expect from your situation, from the spaces that you are, it really helps to restore the sense of structure in life. And again, so I bring this back to the experience of the virtual spaces too. So as we're developing new habits and also being a customization to these virtual spaces and experiences, what would be the indicators of familiarity in the virtual environment? And I think that's a question that we would like to explore. Lastly, we have the final layer of within the spatial perceptions, and we selected 2 values within this area, and this is really linked to how you would perceive our, let's say, relationships within the space or with also other entities in this, occupying this space. So one is transparency, right? The transparent, how do we make sure that we can have accessible transparency, whether it's about transparent information as we're going through the times of big uncertainty. So how do we know what to trust, believe, or how can we know where things are at the moment? Is there a way for us to have access to this flow of information that we can trust? Another one linked to the accessibility concept is on the equitable access, and this we also are experiencing as a collective at the moment of the digital divide and the issues of digital literacy. So having access to these virtual digital technologies is great, so we can stay connected, but at the same time, it brings us a question about who is the in-group and who is the out-group, who has the access to these spaces, these new experiences, so they can continue on with their life. And if we are in a moment where we're going to bring these digital technologies into the everyday lives, how can we ensure that we provide the right access or equitable access to these virtual communities, education opportunities, events, and other experiences? So with these 4 clusters, we have put those into the 4 pillars here, or the 4 different visions that we think are interesting to further explore in our next steps. So the first one is on the self-care, identity, control, and productivity. How might we create a city with infrastructures of care that support our well-being and actualization of a self-identity? How can it support those? The second would be in the social connection, spontaneity, and exploration. So how can we create a city of engagement where relational and meaningful human experiences are supported in this convergence of virtual and physical spaces? Third, again, now we go into more of the locality and community, thinking about how we can really form this community. So when we're no longer confined to spatial boundaries, how can we create or how can we redefine what local community means, and how can we ensure that our sense of belonging in these new communities can be continuously supported and formed? The last one, the last city that we think could be a topic for further discussion in these value-driven visions would be a city that's focused on providing equitable access to transparent information, regardless of their digital literacy and access to resources. Yeah, so Bumjin will explain how we're also further thinking about the layers of the city experiences here.
So the layers of city experiences, I mean, I think we're running out of time, so we'll be quick. So the value, which how does address the needs, the desire of the people. And there's a technology which what enabling technologies are providing transformative signals towards different futures. And another layer, which is infrastructures, what supporting infrastructures, network, or products and service can we imagine to bring these experiences? And in the end, the lived city, how would the other 3 layers of the city experiences affect the way we perceive and live? How should we impact our urban and architectural environment? So these 4 layers we are thinking how vision those 4 cluster cities right now.
Right, so in our next steps, we are seeking to take the 4 values, the 4 value-driven visions, and take those through these 4 layers of city experiences, and really then think about what are the possible infrastructures, what are the possible enabling technologies that can enable those, and how can those be connected and influence the way it structures or connects and provides the lived city experiences. So now I would like to invite our panels here. So we have a number of panels, including Professor HongJung Kim, and we have also Dina El-Zanfaly from Carnegie Mellon University, Scott, a design technologist from Sasaki Associates in Boston, Kamala from UC Berkeley within the Department of Anthropology, and lastly, Youngjun Kim from University of Illinois at Chicago and Department of Urban Planning and Policy. So we have invited a very broad number of our guests from different areas, so we can talk more about the 2 points. The first one that I would like to open up is what are the key values to consider as we design and envision city experiences. So from the cluster values that we have, presented to you, which value clusters seem to provide the strongest signal to you in shaping our futures, and also try and where we would like to also invite you to bring your fields of practice and maybe perhaps propose to us other areas that we should consider in developing these visions.
Thank you for your presentation, and then thank you for joining us, all the panels. I think it's very impressive topic at this point where we are all in different place, but we are in the same situation. So I really would like to hear how panelists are thinking about this research you shared. So yeah, let's get started the panel discussion. Does anyone want to start first?
Whoever wants to speak up.
This is another one of those conditions of Zoom, is a lack of bodily cues. You
The
can't
social
really
cues, right?
tell. You can't even tell who's going to go first.
Right. It's hard to read that.
Yeah.
But Bunchen and Ihan, like, this is really impressive. It's amazing the amount of work you've done in like the past 4 weeks, right?
A little bit over the 4 weeks.
Over 4 weeks, but it's been a continuing effort, but we've been spending the 4 weeks to consolidate and analyze the data.
That's amazing. I'm interested if design justice and the idea of equality in the values came up in the discussions and the interviews with the interviewees or not, especially with this age and with all the social justice movements happening. Did anyone discuss?
Yeah, of course. It's been a huge topic about design justice. That's why I think the value of accessibility and transparency was the ones that we had to include, both in terms of who has access to what. I think that was a key experience that people all got to embody through the different social movements that's happening in the US.
Oh, that's great. And I really like the 4 clusters of the values. I found like that the serendipity and the spontaneous interactions as values are very important in your presentation. I think that's also like in the School of Design, we have been talking about the importance of just like running into people and having these social small interactions, which actually produce a lot, not just like social bonding, but also it's like somehow like a disruptive innovation, it helps like innovation in terms of like, this is where great ideas come up, like I'm working on that part and you're working on that part. And so that was also like very interesting. I will let the rest of the panelists talk.
Scott, you're unmuted.
I am unmuted. Yeah. Well, okay. Thank you again. That was it's really kind of an impressive breadth of work that you've compiled here, and it's good to see this kind of research again. Now going back into architecture, into practice, it's a little bit detached from this, but it's good to see, kind of cathartic in a way, to see how much these values are resonating, that they are in fact worthy of this kind of research. So thank you for putting this together. One that caught my eye was the The first one that you had around the idea of caring, specifically the idea of productivity related to that. And I think that I understand where that comes from in terms of it sometimes feels so hard to be productive, to manage time, and it is certainly a control issue. But I wonder if there's also room there to highlight what it means to be unproductive, and what it means to have downtime, to have rest, in many ways to be inefficient, to be pointless, right? Because in many ways it feels like there's this speed and this pace that we have to keep up with. But I think that we sometimes miss the value of doing nothing. Even on our commutes that we used to have, for those of us that are no longer commuting, we may have hated them, but there was nothing else to do in that time. And there was sort of a luxury in some ways of doing nothing. So I think that one in particular perhaps could grow to encompass that as well. It's still a control issue. It's still very much about decoupling the interior of the home from the exterior, but I think pairing productive with unproductive could be a more nuanced approach.
That's a really good point. The inefficiency, the luxury of inefficiency, I think it's key, and how we can also embody that in our spaces too.
And also, like, maybe it's relation to well-being. Like that goes back to that point. Like, yeah, instead of you're always on, you're always working, you have to be fully like using your time all the time. Like, this idea of commuting and not working is actually helps your well-being and mental being as well.
Like the transitional space.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can I have?
Yes, please.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed your very detailed cartography of emotions and experiences and values that emerge from that infrastructure of our city experiences, and I really enjoyed it. And you really made a good graphic and visualized presentation of those strata of reality. So I got a clear understanding of what is happening right now around the world. As I major in social theories or philosophy, so I got two questions which maybe sounds like a little fundamental. But first one is, as far as I know, there are two different ways of making approach to psychic phenomenon. One is emotional approach, and the other is affective approach proposed by Gilles Deleuze, Brian Massumi, and feminist studies, etc. So emotion is considered as something contained inside of individuals. I feel something, I am sad, that's emotion. But when something happens in a society, pre-individual flows of energies flow, just like electricity or just like climatic energies, I don't know. And when I am connected to that energy, even before feeling it consciously, precisely at that moment, that energy becomes my feeling. That is called emotion. And that impersonal energy is called affect or effect. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly in English. So I think your approach is more based on the emotional understanding of the world. The world is, composed of different individuals, and they feel something separately and differently, and that reality make up a reality of the collectivity after. But we can think the other way around. There is something, fear, a certain fear or horror caused by the pandemic situation, and that horror is circulating all through the media, SNS, and atmospheric, capillary ways, and the terminal, final subject is me. So I feel and after, collective sentiment is formed, that's one thing. But another scenario is also possible that something happened there, creating a massive, huge amount of energy, and I am the final, subject who can feel it. So I think it's, as I said, it's fundamental. So you don't have to, reply to it theoretically, but I just wanted to remind you of those two different ways of approaching the same reality. And secondly is, you pose the question of what is a city experience. And I think that question may be based on the assumption that city is a region in which we are living. But I think pandemic situation made a very strange possibility of thinking of the city as a, network. So I am close to my neighbor in the city right now, but I don't have any contact with him. I'm contacting with people in New York, people in Busan, in Seoul, by various ways. So the fact that I'm living in a city changed it a lot after the pandemic. So what is the authentic meaning of living in a city or having an experience of a city since we are living already in a differentiated, or I don't know, a changed world of contacting people, which may be called a city, or I don't know, imaginary city, virtual city. So two very, very fundamental questions that you don't have to reply to right now, but I want you to think about it, in a way or another. Yeah.
Yes.
I think Kamala has something. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I really appreciate your comment just now, Dr. Kim. And I think actually there's two ways in which both of those questions are in some ways already folded into the project. So I'll just say the thing I found very interesting about looking at this kind of summary of the data is that where one might expect people to feel very concerned about their level of social engagement, people are actually very concerned about their need for space, boundaries, and disengagement, and the need to maintain some kind of boundary between themselves as a subject and the possibility of invasion from the environment or the possibility of sensory overload from their job, from their child, from the uncertainty of entering into certain public spaces. And so, I wonder if the way the probe was designed, though it uses the term emotion, actually captures some aspect of that interface between the individual and the environment quite well. The second point the second question that you had raised about the nature of the city, I think that might be where we end up taking the discussion, looking ahead to question 2, might be somewhat of where we end up taking the discussion, which is thinking about, what actually has the pandemic and what have these kinds of responses to it that this survey has captured so well. Like, what does that actually really tell us about what is important in a city and how that can be built up, or how that can be, produced as a product, sold as a service, to some extent, the kind of experiences that I think some of the respondents that Ian was talking about, some of the respondents are pointing to are these kind of multi-layered, not so localized experiences of being in the city. So it's, being able to, the possibility of choosing a restaurant, it's not just a local, it's not just an experience of a particular locality. That's an experience of a kind of possibility of, spontaneity of commerce or something like that. It's these kind of values, that I also thought were quite interesting, looking at this summary, was that there seems to be also a kind of split between values that are about entertainment and maybe like values, entertainment and personhood, versus values that might be more on the question of like ethical or like equity or participation. I mean, it's not a comment so much as just or not a question so much as a comment, trying to sort out some of the two different kinds of possible responses or interventions in response to this kind of to the data that we're being shown here. So, thank you guys for this.
Yeah, Youngjun.
Yeah, Youngjun.
Yeah, can I ask one question? Yes, I think my understanding of this is kind of to provide a solution or a suggestion of how our built environment, cities, and architecture are being prepared for post-COVID period. And I think the underlying assumption for this study that I think is COVID-19 already has and will impact our society and built environment as a permanently resulting into new normal. But I think, however, I think there are things that can be changing rapidly, such as a collection of individual decisions of like buying certain products over others. But on the other hand, I think there are things such as institutions, regulations, or already built like a physical urban fabric that are difficult to change in a short period of time. So I think in this context, it'll be good to think about what would have a high potential to be changed permanently and what would be stay the same or being recovered before the pandemic. So I think if you guys are trying to suggest both ends, I think that's fine. But if you're focusing on one or the other, I think the solution or suggestion can be provided differently. So I think it could be suggesting either how to provide new typology or use of space, or how to smoothly bring back to pre-COVID standards and norms. So I think, so what's your focus for this next step of this research is kind of the question.
I think that's a really good point. I think for us, we saw this as an opportunity to see what is really important to us as we are living in a detached from the city experiences, right? Before, we thought that we lived in a city. I chose to live in Boston because I like what Boston provides. No longer it is provided to me because I am confined to my space, and I am actually in other spaces through Zoom and through other virtual spaces. So we thought that this was an interesting moment of convergence of digital, physical, and also virtual spaces in here, where we can now think, how can we maybe form a space, think about formulating experience of city and redefine what city means to us. So in this case, we're thinking more in terms of kind of speculating what that future might be, rather than thinking about what are some of the possible immediate roadmap of actions that we can take to go back to the pre-COVID situations or to get right into the new normal. So I think we will be cognizant of some of the let's say confinement or regulations that we would have to consider. But I think in our case, for the next steps for the WTA open call would be to think more in terms of those speculative terms.
And I think that really, taps into the potential of studying values. I mean, it's such a good way to focus it, because obviously in design, we often focus on product life cycles, on object life cycles, on building life cycles even. But, I'm preaching to the choir here, but values are a much longer lasting thing, something that spans many more generations than the things we actually design and build. So I do appreciate this focus on values as a way to figure out exactly what the problems are to fix now, because the problems to fix now are not the exact things that have risen from the pandemic, right? It's not that we are using this project or that you are using this project to fix the pandemic. As devastating as it has been, the real thing is that it has exposed so much of our society, so many issues in our society, and really kind of thrown them into harsh light. And I think by using values as kind of the crux term there, you can say in what ways do the issues that we're feeling tread on our values, and how can we use those as the locus, even after the pandemic is done? How can we still kind of carry this forward using those as the medium?
Just as a kind of counterpoint and to push on the idea of value a little bit, And to be the anthropologist in the room, I guess to me, one issue, I guess, with thinking about, with interpreting the data from this study as values is that looking at what the results sort of have yielded, it seems to me that there are some values. So there are some principles or okay, I'll say this a different way. A lot of times value is like a higher degree of accruing of like symbolic capital or something like that. It's an image of the self that one wants to have. It's also, value is often a question of desire. And a lot of the kind of responses that you see in this data is people asking for things. They want an experience of spontaneity. They want an ability to, I'm glancing back at my notes. They want to feel familiar. They want to feel in control. They want to feel like they have a routine, though their routine has been disrupted. And I think to some extent, there is a caution there in thinking, okay, who is going to be giving people what they want? And do they really want that? So then that's only to say that I think one dimension that the project can think of going forward is the dimension of I guess, like governance versus service, or product versus governance, and where the question of authority might come into into like envisioning city futures. It's like sort of, so who, under what authority is the space for this value to be cultivated, produced? So does a private company produce, give you the ability to link your phone to something in a public space so you have a certain experience? Or is that a question of, the reorganization of the boundaries of a restaurant versus what space is under public authority? I mean, I think the question of authority, of governance, and maybe, as Dr. Kim was bringing us to, of, being subjected might be a useful theoretical or analytical dimension going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that may link us to, I guess, role of architects and role of architecture in this case. As we're imagining, from our perspective, let's say if we have the agency to do so, to think about how we can convey the values that we have found through the lens of designer, through the lens of architects, what could the possible implications of these ideas in the restructuring of our spaces and the environments around us. So I would also like to kind of pose a question back to you to hear about what your thoughts are in terms of its possible impact in our built environment.
Maybe I'll start. I think it's kind of related to the first question for me, because I was very interested in the importance on the interpersonal relationship. I think it was a cluster 2. I've been seeing the growing importance and interest on interaction, communication, and their impact on innovation over the last decade, at least in urban policy and urban development. And I think this idea in social value kind of transferred and also transformed into the market standard for commercial real estate and urban development, which is unfolding and influencing work environments such as like office space and living environment, such as large-scale high-rise residential development in global market. I think more specifically, it reshapes physical floor plan and design of office space and its location and also surrounding environments. So I think the co-working space can be one example of how they are becoming a market standard. It started in the late 2000s and then became a market standard since early 2010s. And now we may find WeWork offices all over the world and other national and local co-working spaces chains. And it's not just co-working space, because the similar idea, concept, and expectation have transferred to the residential development market. So you see a lot of new high-rise condo and apartment in the United States and North American cities has kind of similar type of like a co-working environment within their residential buildings. So I think the main ideas and standards behind these products and outcomes, which facilitate and accelerate previous commercial real estate booms in 2008 period will be facing a great challenge that COVID has made to rethink about these values and the materialized form of the values. So I think this will be an important to reorganize, reshape the physical products such as buildings and designs. And I think that creating a space for social connection and interaction is emphasized over the last decade. I think we are in the process of how to transfer or replace this physical space by digital space. And this transition has accelerated by COVID-19. So I think how to balance between this. Yeah, I didn't give the answer of what the architects and planners or designers going to do, but I think that's kind of like the earlier boom was definitely focusing on certain things which are now kind of having a huge challenge for this pandemic. So how they can adjust their practices and strategies might be kind of we might need to think about not just for two of you guys, it's all. Sorry, too far, I don't know. Yeah.
This is Youngjun's point is very interesting, and building on that point, I think like we are seeing now, like even like in terms of investment on the individual level, but also like on societal level, there has been a lot of investment in home and how to make your home more comfortable. Like I think pre-COVID, especially like in condensed density cities, there has been like this idea of like you're treating the home as just like a place to rest or sleep, but like you are always spending the rest of your time outside of this home in terms of leisure, like you're going out, and also like you're working outside your home. But now like the idea of home or the house or the building is being transformed into just like like a multi-purpose space. Like it's like a place you're working with, you're also doing your meetings, so there's like this, I think we will be seeing in terms of economy in particular, there will be a lot of investment in homes and working from homes, and even like making your environment more comfortable. Like if you look at like what people are buying right now, like where they're spending their money, they are not going out into restaurants to spend their money. They are actually spending their money on like new sofas, new home equipment, and actually working out equipment like Peloton, the company for like the smart bikes at home, and which actually has like this social connection of like working out together.
Right.
So it has like these check marks,
Yeah.
and that's also like you are seeing this booming somehow. Like you're not like people are canceling their gym memberships and they are looking at ways to exercise at home. So yeah, I just don't want to take more time of other panelists.
It's a very interesting and important point, because from a sociological point of view, our imaginary topology of the social, I think, is changing rapidly, because economy, the eco of economy and the eco of ecology is being folded into the eco home or household in a literal sense. The third eco is coming, which is our home. And inside a home, inside a house, there's economic activity, there are economic activities and religious activities and sportive activities and everything. So we are, I don't know, nobody can expect the future definitely, but it seems that the real eco is coming as a very important space or place which absorbs the outside, the modern social, political, or economic outside into itself. So I call it just the third eco regime. of the social in a recent presentation of ideas, about the pandemic. And I think it's very important point, the home in our pandemic period. Yeah.
Oh, can I add to this? Yeah, I think I forgot to answer the Ian's question is, I think the locus of activity is shifted geographically. So, and also we saw a lot of the physical buildings and design products and outcomes that are left are based on the previous standards and things like that. So I think co-working is one example, but so I think maybe the architect, you guys as a designer and architects, how we can readjust the existing commodities or space or building readjust to the new normal could be kind of like one thing that you guys can focus on, or it doesn't have to be a physical building, it can be a location as well. Like for instance, I think the previous decade, a lot of high-rise residential developments are developed around the metro station, like a subway station. That was kind of like people are trying to, their argument was millennials want to live very close to the transit hub, and then they care about like work, live, and play, and those changing a lot of built environment. Now, even though we are working at home, those built environment is already there. It's going to be difficult to change radically to the new normal. So I think maybe you guys can start to thinking about how this leftover, it's not trash or leftover, but those space that are leave behind from the previous market standard and norms, how you guys are going to reuse or adjust by using not too much resources, but still going to be useful for the next generation. Could be kind of like I'll start from there as a planner or designer. Yeah.
So I've heard a lot of kind of different ideas floated around over the past 9 months. Getting rid of open plans because of air circulation, maintaining flexibility in workspaces, which seems logical. The 15-minute city, which is kind of wild to think about because we were just researching the mega city a couple of years ago, and now it's like shrunk down. Yeah. But I think that all of these quick ideas, I worry that they're all still prone to fail if we don't actually, as architects and designers, reflect a little bit more on the methods of how we do this. And I think that this idea of engagement is a really crucial one to pick up on here. If we're talking so much about values, how can architects find a way to fold this type of research into their work? So within Sasaki, we have a group called Strategies, and we try to come up with digital tools to help with this kind of thing. And one that we have is called CoMap, and it's basically like a survey, but it's over a mapping experience. So users can virtually answer questions in a specific place and kind of pinpoint spatially what their values and experiences are across a kind of given boundary. And it not only increases engagement, but it actually really creates a much richer experience for people using the tool. So I think that kind of thing, how can we increase engagement and actually reach out and communicate with companies that are traditionally disengaged to discuss this, because it's not just the kind of quick solution that's going to do it. Architects have never really been good at doing that. We really need to find ways to increase that kind of engagement before figuring this out.
It's a great point, I think. I think it goes back to how we can kind of also co-design these spaces, not just from the expert's point of view, but also to give power to the people and then also have them have their values, have their experiences, and to engage them in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I also have one comment, and then I think, because from our side, I wonder, because at this point, the research seems to stay mostly at theoretical and also the diagrammatic level. So will there be the next stage, hopefully a little more specific? So I wonder how it goes to the next step. So that's what I want to No.
That's a great question. And I think we can end there, end this talk there. So that's going to be our challenge in the next weeks coming ahead, how to then architecturalize these ideas into spatial concepts or into ideas of infrastructure, how it forms a city. So I want to go back to the 4 layers of city experiences that we were teasing around. So how can we then bring these values to think about, let's say, one could be reorganizing the existing spaces, or to think about new ways of connection, or even to think about how we can bring in or design or think about designing virtual spaces so we can integrate that into maybe our physical environment. So there will be lots of conceptualization that we'll do, and we hope to share some of those ideas visually with everyone.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Actually, this panel discussion session is supposed to finish by 12:15, but 50, but we extended a little bit. So I think these various comments shared will be a great help to your next work. And then I'm very looking forward to see how it will proceed. So, and thank you for all your comment and then participation and your presentation. And yeah, thank you. And then the next presentation will begin at 2 p.m. at this channel. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you for joining here, because it's 11 p.m. in here. Actually, even my brain is not really running well. So
late at night.
Want to say thank you, everything. I mean, so yeah.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining from all over the world to this session.
Thanks for having us.
Bye. Take care.
That's great. Thank you so much.
See
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.